welcome everyone to our presentation today, Empowering Early Career Humanities Researchers to Successfully Navigate the Scholarly Publishing Process. This presentation is being brought to you by the ACRL University Libraries Section Professional Development Committee. We are really delighted to have you and our presenters here today. My name is Jane Himmons. I am co-chair of the University Libraries Professional Development Committee, and I'll be moderating this program along with my colleague Jason. And this is one of an ongoing series of online programs that is sponsored to our by our committee, and I'll put a link to our programs in the chat in just a second. Before we hand it over to the presenters, just please keep in mind this session is being recorded, and we'll send a link of the video, slides, and any other supplemental documentation to everyone who is registered. Please note that we are not able to share the chat transcript due to privacy reasons, but we will be sure to share any links or questions we receive in the chat along with the recording. The program will run for a total of 1 hour, including time for questions. Please feel free to add your questions to the chat box throughout the presentation, and we'll be collating them and we'll be prepared to provide them to today's presenters. Please note, as you use the chat feature, make sure that you are sending your message to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see what you are asking. And at the end of the session, we'll post a link to a brief evaluation in the chat box. So please take a few minutes to give us your feedback on today's program. With those announcements out of the way, I am very happy to hand the presentation over to our presenters today. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jane. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to our talk. Thanks for joining us today. Our presentation that we put together focuses on a talk that we gave called Empowering Early Career Humanities Researchers to Successfully Navigate the Scholarly Publishing Process. And I'll start by introducing our presenters. I'm Johanna Meetz, the Publishing and Repository Services Librarian at Ohio State, and I oversee Ohio State's institutional repository and publishing programs. Jen Schnabel provides research, consultations, and teaching and learning support for the students, faculty, and staff in the Department of English, and she's also the library liaison to the Department of Linguistics and to the Film Studies program. Maria Scheid is the head of copyright services at Ohio State University Libraries, and she provides information on copyright to faculty, staff, and students of the university active in teaching, research, and scholarship. And Maria Jimenez-Moreo is the literacy and cultural studies acquisitions editor at Ohio State University Press. And to give a little bit of background information about our university, Ohio State is an R1 institution with about 52,000 undergraduate students and about 11,400 graduate students. And then there are about 7,800 faculty members. And then Ohio State University Press was established in 1957, and its mission is to advance knowledge by disseminating scholarship in the humanities and social sciences, and they publish both books and journals. Our talk today is going to focus on 3 areas. First, how we came together to collaborate across the library and our institution and created a panel that adds to the canon of Publishing 101 talks. Second, how we structured our panel to address common questions we received from students and faculty about the scholarly publishing process, as well as how this format modeled the process of asking questions to students. And third, what we learned from the event, what information was most valuable to the audience, what questions the audience still had, and what other events we think might be helpful to them. And Jen, you can go ahead and advance the slide. So our partnership on this project grew out of previously established relationships. When I started in my position at Ohio State in 2020, I made it a priority to meet with subject librarians to share about my position, as well as to learn how they had been interacting with their constituents about scholarly publishing, open access, and sharing publications in our institutional repository. And at that time, Jen asked if I'd like to partner with her and with Maria, who Jen had previously invited to present about copyright to her constituents, to create an event or a tool to educate graduate students about the scholarly publishing process, because Jen had really seen some knowledge gaps in this area, particularly with graduate students. And Jen also suggested that we invite Anna, who she had recently met, to join us to add her university press perspective. Next slide.
Okay. At OSU, librarians and library staff members consistently receive inquiries from researchers about the scholarly publishing process. I'm sure all of you experience the same thing. Questions range from how to use third-party materials, such as images, in their work, to interpreting an author agreement around copyright ownership and options for making research free and open. Librarians are sometimes invited to graduate seminars or faculty meetings to share information about a particular aspect of scholarly publishing, and online and in-person events about copyright and open access publishing are held regularly. Researchers often approach library staff when they are confused by a question from a publisher or when they receive an email about an open access choice as part of institutional transformative publishing agreements. This is especially true for humanities researchers, I have found, many of whom do not receive grant funding to cover author processing charges, APCs, to ensure that their work is published open access. All of this signaled an opportunity to provide a resource created specifically with early career humanities researchers in mind that they could access at their point of need. So here's some other frequently asked questions here, and I'm sure you've also come across these in your work. Okay, so to make our work, to make our event as accessible, impactful, and efficient as possible, we planned a virtual event that we could record so that it could be shared with anyone who couldn't attend, as well as be available to people who might be interested in the future. The presentation was held in the spring of 2022. 65 people registered and 31 attended. The target audience of this event was graduate students and early career faculty in humanities departments. We chose graduate students to be our primary audience because they are uniquely positioned to share what they know with undergrads, as well as with faculty. We aim for humanities graduate students since open access has been adopted more slowly in these fields, like we mentioned before. And we wanted to normalize the idea that no one, not even experienced faculty members or librarians, knows everything about publishing and never needs to reach out to other experts for help. We structured our presentation like a panel or a roundtable where I asked questions of the rest of the participants who were experts in their areas. And the questions were those commonly asked by graduate students in relevant subject areas. Each panelist planned to weigh in as appropriate to their area of expertise, so there was some pre-preparation going on here. The questions themselves were formulated like scenarios to set a conversational tone and to encourage those listening to reach out to us later. We wanted to appear friendly and approachable. So the panel questions are: how do you turn a course paper, parts of your dissertation or conference paper into a journal article? What would you need to do to propose an edited collection or special issue of a journal? How do you turn your dissertation or other research into a monograph? And what other kinds of publications might you consider, and what additional things should be considered when publishing non-traditionally?
Okay, so within these different panel questions or different scenarios, I had provided information on copyright, and that involved information to determine copyright ownership under US copyright law, but also understanding how rights or ownership could be impacted under our institutional intellectual property policy, which many institutions have. So I shared information on what exactly it means to be a copyright owner, the bundle of exclusive rights that you get, and how those rights come up in the publishing process. And then making that connection between the terms of a particular publishing agreement and the impact that those terms can have on an author's ability to use their work, and also the impact the terms can have on access to scholarship. As part of the discussion, I also shared some potential areas for negotiation, things like the difference between transfer of copyright versus a non-exclusive license, permitted uses, warranties, things like that. And for my part, I talked a lot about copyright issues from an author's perspective. An author is presented with a publishing agreement. What should they know to be able to make informed decisions about the rights that they do have? And also emphasizing that negotiation is a conversation, not a battle, where authors should be asking for uses that align with their interests for their scholarship.
And my contributions to the presentation emphasize thinking about the audience that you want to reach in order to identify a journal to submit your work to. And then once you've identified a journal, you can write using their requirements for submission in mind from the beginning, which can save you time. I also emphasized where to get ideas for papers to publish, how to choose an appropriate journal, and then how to evaluate open access journals. And then I also talked about accessibility and preservation considerations.
And yes, and by way of reminder, I focus on book or monograph publishing, and most of the information that I shared had to do with process. Mentors and colleagues should be a good resource for the content of the project. However, there's a lot of work that goes into A, finding the right press or publisher, and B, formatting the work for circulation. Typically, scholars do have to do some research, not just into the presses that publish in their field, but if it is an active list, publishing strategies, and if in some form the editor and the author or another kind of editor scholar are compatible, it is a long-term relationship. The other part of the equation is the format, to make sure that they are transmitting information in such a way that it is visible to their acquisitions, or sometimes called a commissioning editor and their peers. And some graduate courses might include publishing workshops, which are so useful and need to be done and continued, of course. But those workshops might just, again, focus on content and be geared towards getting feedback from other scholars, even if not in that particular field. Our discussion in our panel that we did was on yet another layer of the publishing story. It is about demystifying the process and also giving participants a wider vocabulary about the steps they might encounter. Additionally, making them aware that they have a say in how the process unfolds and what are useful negotiating points, to Maria's point, so that this, publishing encounter is not just happening to them, was the aim in our discussion. So for example, when it comes to the contract, we wanted to make sure the participants had a sense of what rights they have, what rights they are held by the press, and what terms can be negotiated and why. In another version of this, I would have loved to also discuss what financial responsibilities might come down the line, such as indexing, and how they can expect their work to live on after initial publication, for example, in a repository or as an open access text, which is something outlined in the contract, for example. At the end of the day, I hope we communicated that we are resources ourselves, even if we are not a librarian in the subject area or an acquisitions editor in the field. We do know enough to sustain a conversation, or we will know who to get in touch with. Ideally, those students will help other students and or other junior faculty at those institutions, at our institutions particularly.
So we sent 2 surveys out about our panel, and the first went out just right after the event. And that survey contained positive feedback with participants indicating that they were likely to recommend the session, as well as expressing satisfaction with the content and with us as presenters. And then when we decided to publish an article about our presentation, we sent out a second survey and asked for additional feedback from new viewers of the recording of the panel. And unsurprisingly, we received fewer responses because it involved, watching an hour-long recording of a panel and then taking a survey. But still, we gleaned some insights, including 4 of the 6 students indicated that their understanding of scholarly publishing on a scale of 1 to 5 was a 3. And then, great. Half the students indicated that their familiarity with journal publishing on a scale of 1 to 5 was a 3, and 2 rated their understanding a 4. Four students reported that most of their questions were answered by the panel, and the remaining 2 said that some questions were answered by the panel. And then 4 of the 5 respondents who ranked their initial understanding of scholarly publishing as a 3 or a 4 had most of their questions answered by the panel, and the person who rated their understanding of scholarly publishing as a 2 had some of their questions answered. We also asked respondents to rank additional topics to cover in future presentations, and those potential topics from most interest to least interest are listed here. Pros and cons of publishing your work open access, understanding and or negotiating author agreements, how to publish your thesis or dissertation, the book publishing process, the article publishing process, identifying resources for help or where to go for help, predatory publishing, and including another person's material in your publication, such as an image. So overall, in the survey, the students indicated that they have about an average familiarity with scholarly publishing and are neither beginners nor experts. And they also expressed more confidence when asked about journal publishing and a greater familiarity with open access in general. And overall, the students shared that some or most of their questions were answered by our presentation.
So this partnership we considered a success, and we each have our own measure of impact on the partnership since we have different jobs. For me, as a subject librarian, I was able to integrate these topics more in the English department's introductory research methods courses. I was also able to provide high-level information about scholarly publishing to upper-level undergraduate students who were undertaking large research projects. So it was a good opportunity to have these conversations early on, especially for those students who are planning to go to graduate school. I was also able to create a graduate student fellowship program with the English department designed around educating participants on the production and dissemination of scholarship and providing them with transferable skills if they chose careers outside of the academy. And I was able to bring in people, including Anna from OSU Press, to talk to students about her job and all of the different jobs that are available in the scholarly publishing industry. And I also have a greater understanding of how librarians can partner with university press colleagues to educate students and faculty about processes.
So from my perspective, the impact for this partnership, looking at the topics for future presentations, there's a demonstrated need for continued outreach around authors' rights, and then in my area particularly on understanding and negotiating author agreements. This collaboration also gave me a greater awareness of common issues or concerns across the university around scholarly publishing. So we are all receiving related questions around the topic, and it was helpful to hear that. It was also just to hear about the experiences my colleagues had in answering those questions or offering support. My unit, Copyright Services, provides expertise in copyright. It's all copyright all the time in our work, so our knowledge is deep in that area, but being able to plan and offer a session like this allowed me to personally receive important context to my own work, and it really demonstrated the power here of shared knowledge. So for example, I can talk to authors about anticipating uses of the research and negotiating based on those uses. But the conversations that my colleagues are having with authors can give a lot more context to what those actual typical uses may be or the emerging uses that authors are confronting. And that context is helpful in my next conversations with authors to say, you know, have you thought of this? Or here's an example of how an author has previously navigated this issue. And then lastly, and I think really critically, this partnership was a way to effectively and efficiently share copyright information. So I'm aware that copyright can be unclear and hard to apply. It can be intimidating, and it's also prone to a lot of misinformation. So even well-intentioned best practices may not always be reflective of what the law actually says or what policy may support. And while I do one-off presentations on copyright topics, engagement can be really difficult. And this type of approach was much more effective to incorporate copyright information into a larger conversation in a much more natural way, in a much more approachable way, reaching audiences that I may have had more difficulty reaching out to by myself. Being able to talk about rights and how certain terms of an agreement interact with those rights in the context of the publishing process, I think made the law more accessible and understandable to the group. And also the whole publishing and negotiation process can feel really scary. So being able to see that there are multiple resources available and to have friendly voices from different perspectives, I think can help ease that fear. So next slide.
Like my colleagues, I learned lots of different things from our collaboration. And the first, I think, is the power of connection. And this event really came together and happened because we had connected with one another and had, built building and then have continued to build since then, really open and communicative relationships amongst ourselves. Like Maria, I also feel that I gained a greater understanding of common issues and concerns across the university. The nature of my job means that I do not have as many opportunities as I would like to kind of gain an understanding of basic things like what it's like to be a graduate student or an early career researcher at Ohio State. So anytime I have an opportunity to learn more about that, it's exciting to me. And then I think that it may be that graduate students and early career researchers are overestimating their understanding of the publishing process. My experience on this panel confirms this impression from my work generally. It seems like people think that they know more about publishing or that they think they know all there is about publishing. But then when they ask questions, they demonstrate that they don't. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way at all. Publishing and all of its norms are complex. But I do think it is inherently more difficult to teach people about something that they feel like they already understand or they already have got a hold on. So kind of thinking about instruction and tackling that is something that I've been thinking about how to move forward, with an understanding that that may be the case.
So one of the major outcomes for me was that this was a professional development event. Typically, I am on a panel with other editors, acquisitions editors, or sometimes just university press folks. So this was special when participants can see a wider scholarly ecosystem at work. When I meet with authors, I can help navigate them to the resources that they need. For example, in my publishing spiel to new authors or relatively junior authors, I let them know that if they feel a bit shy about speaking with me about their contract, they should consult a copyright librarian or someone with a similar role at their institution, understanding, of course, that not everybody is quite has all those different kinds of librarians available to them. Also, just even understanding more, having a greater concept of copyright, since I think acquisitions editors do a kind of review of the materials that authors send us, and so we sometimes feel we are there to enforce copyright law without being, a lawyer or anything approaching that. So it's always really enlightening getting that perspective from another professional. And lastly, every talk is an opportunity to revise and update. When acquisitions editors do these talks, we know we have to translate some of our jargon or technical language to the audience that we have. However, sometimes we get questions that makes us revise our assumptions and sometimes even better define or contextualize what we are expecting or asking of our potential authors, constituents, participants. So these are great opportunities because ultimately we all benefit from a sense that publishing is a safe, collaborative, and encouraging environment.
So we wanted to wrap up by addressing how others might hold a similar event, particularly at a smaller institution or at institutions without a university press. And first, we recommend kind of thinking about a potential audience. If librarians are in a position where they interact with students or faculty frequently, they likely have some idea of who might benefit from learning more about the publishing process. And if a librarian's role does not include this type of engagement, it will be useful to collaborate and include someone who does, like a subject librarian. Our collaboration came together smoothly because we have open, respectful, and communicative working relationships with one another, but also because we are all focused on meeting the needs of the audience that our subject librarian had identified. And once organizers and students understand the different groups of researchers, could be undergraduates, graduate students, early career faculty, mid-career faculty, late career faculty, as well as different subject areas like the humanities, social sciences, or hard sciences, and then each of those groups' needs, that can help structure the questions and panelists in the presentation. So we would encourage colleagues not to be afraid of having a narrow audience, as it can sharpen focus and ensure that the material covered is really targeted at the audience, which can result in a better outcome. Browsing LibGuides can be a good starting point to see what sort of information is presented out there in written format about scholarly communication issues or publishing generally, particularly if the guides are aimed at the same audience or a similar audience. And these can usually just be found pretty easily by searching the internet. Once an audience is identified and panelists agree on the questions that they'd like to cover, it's worth considering what other perspectives would be helpful. And this could include someone from a university press or a researcher who is very experienced with publishing articles or monographs. All the participants don't have to be from the same institution. So if an institution doesn't have a university press, organizers might reach out to one that's in the same state or one at a peer institution. Alternatively, librarians at other institutions may have perspective to add and may be willing to join the panel too. And this could open up the possibility of having a cross-institutional presentation where students from both places could join. And if someone asks a question that panelists can't answer immediately, obviously it's always important to remember that they can, investigate the topic after the event and send a follow-up email. You don't have to feel like you know everything in order to hold an event. And then lastly, if an event like this would be helpful at an institution, but planning and executing it seems impossible due to any obstacle, librarians can focus on the elements that are within their control. So for example, if no one in the library is willing to collaborate, a subject or liaison librarian might approach a specific disciplinary department and offer to give a talk there. Or if recording an event isn't possible, organizing a live event obviously still has value. And with that, we're happy to answer questions, but I'll also say thanks again for coming today. I saw that someone in the chat did ask if we can share the link to the video, and yes, we can. I will grab that.
Please feel free to add questions to the chat or to the Q&A. See lots of kudos coming in. Thank you, Johanna, for adding that. So we'll give it just another 30 seconds to see if we have any questions or comments that folks would like to share. I have just added into the chat a link to the evaluation form. So if you have a few minutes, we ask that you please fill that form out. We'll also send a link to that form with a follow-up email as well, in case you can't get it today. So I hope everyone will join me in thanking our presenters today for sharing their experience with us.
I'm so sorry. There was a question in the Q&A, but I think Jen is handling that. I'm sure we'll be happy to share the publication.
Yes, if you were able to respond to that question verbally, I know that folks may not have seen or heard what that question was.
It's just asking for a link to the article that we wrote. So I think
Okay.
Jen is grabbing the link and we can throw that in the chat and or reply.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Yes, I believe the training link video was dropped earlier in the chat. Is that correct? That was. Yes, thank you. Oh, wait, that's the article. Okay. Okay.
Our article is open access, so it should be. No, there was a video link, a YouTube. Further up.
There we go.
I re-put the video. Yeah.
You did.
So,
okay.
Yes.
Oh, I think what might have happened is it actually just went to the host and the panelists. So let me share it again. There we go. Yes, thank you. Okay, there we go.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I do that all the time too. So yeah.
Everyone can see the link to the article though. Yeah. And if anyone has any questions, please reach out to us. We're happy to talk about this. We're always thinking of new ways to do this, right? So this was in 2022. Things are changing, of course, so we're always going to update our information, but it's just really nice to solidify this partnership. And we do believe that no matter what type of institution you work for, we wanted to provide different options for ways that you might be able to do a version of this yourself.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here today. Thank you to our presenters. Everyone be on the lookout for that follow-up email. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day. And I think, Brian, we can stop recording now.
Thank you. Bye.
Mhm.